Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 550XP Mark II chainsaw. This one had a crank bearing failure and is having the short block replaced under warranty. So here's our new short block. This is just the way the factory ships it to us. You get the two crankcase halves and a crank with the bearings. So this saw is how it will look after dealers diagnosed it. And the reason I say that is, you see the cylinders missing, flywheels off of here. This is all part of the inspection process and diagnosing. They're going to want pictures of the cylinder and pictures of the failure. It's going to be torn down to a certain point after pressure testing it and then opening it up and diagnosing it. Taking pictures to send them in for the warranty claim. So you see this side, the crank bearing seal, everything's intact. The failure was on the flywheel side. So we removed a couple things here, the handles off of it. Right now I'm removing some screws in the carburetor tray. That's the little orange tray underneath the carburetor that the fuel lines pass through. Keeps the dirt out of the airbox area. I think there's 4 screws. 3 for sure. I wasn't counting. Alright, on this side we're going to have an anti-vibe mount spring right here. And the goal now is to get this fuel tank off. So one of the screws was in the chain catch. I had removed that. And the other screw was in the handle to the cylinder. So we kind of just rock that fuel tank to a side and pull it out of there. And we'll just clean up some of this schmutz so that it's clean when I'm ready to put it on the new short block. This white piece is called an air nozzle. Single screw holding that in place. And then we have our ignition coil. A couple of screws holding this down. And you'll notice on this Mark II version, the wires that go from the coil to the carburetor, they're in this track right here. And it kind of snaps down into place. And that really does protect the wires. They're not just tucked into that groove, but they're in a plastic holder in that groove. And that plastic holder's got a couple of tabs that you got to unlock in order to pop it out of here. If you break a wire, you either have to try and repair it or replace the whole coil. So we'll clean this up a little bit too. Alright, now the snap locks that hold the cylinder cover down, those can be removed by just pushing up on the lower tab and then pushing the whole tab through the slot in the side of the crankcase. We're just kind of compressing that tab and then pulling the whole snap lock right out through the slot. I never said it was easy. That's the way it's done. I think I'm going to make a little tool for popping these out. I haven't quite decided how I'm going to do that. Ooh, I almost lost it. Good thing that was an old crankcase. This screw here is for locating the cylinder cover. And the new short block isn't tapped for these threads. And I think the idea is they just use a self-tapping screw and run it in there. I'm going to use a tap and make some threads and then run it in there. It'd be a shame to strip it out or crack the case or whatever. It's just as easy to run a tap in there first. Took me a minute. And now the screw will go right in. Okay, let's put this ignition coil in the new sharp block. We're going to lay it down into place. And, you know, there's just 2 screws that hold it down. And when I tighten these down, I'm going to be pushing the coil forward towards the oil tank and snugging it. So when I put the flywheel on there, it's not going to interfere. The wiring track that just pops down into the groove, snaps into place. I really like that. It's clean, protects the wires. So we'll run this screw down on the coil and snug it. Here we go. Alright, what are we going to do next? We're going to lay the high tension lead into its groove. Another nice clean installation or nice clean look that Husqvarna's done to these saws. We're going to put our air nozzle into place, a single screw holding that down. I mean, all we're doing is transferring parts from the old block to the new one. And sometimes the right order makes a difference. You'll see a little later on there's something I may have done out of order. And we're getting to it now. First we'll move this spike over here. This is just the factory stock spike. 2 screws, and you know these things always come loose. So it probably would be a good idea to use a little bit of Loctite on these. Let's see if I take my own advice or not. Yeah, I thought I did. Gotta open up the Loctite bottle there a little bit. Just a drop. That's all you need. And then we'll run these down tight. These screws are not holding the 2 crankcase halves together like on some designs. They're just holding the spike in place. You know, this saw that failed wasn't that old, but when you see the 2 sitting next to each other, you know, there's a big difference in the way they look as far as shininess and cleanliness. It doesn't take long for them to get dull. So here we have our chain guide plate. And our brake handle screw. And another brake handle screw. So I'm not going to transfer this brake handle over because it's kind of going to get in the way for putting the cylinder and the muffler on. It's not really in the way, but it'll be easier to do without that handle there. But I am going to move the oil hose for the oil pump. And I'm not even sure why I wiped this thing off. I should have just moved it over and dropped it in the hole. Whatever. I must have saw some debris on there or something. But what I was saying earlier about doing things in order, this all could wait. This little spring right here and lever, this could wait, because if I put this on the saw now like I'm going to do, I'm going to have to put the chain guide plate on to hold it in place so it doesn't fall out during the rest of the repair. And then later I'll have to take the chain guide plate off to easily install the brake handle. So what I'm saying is maybe clean these parts and lay them off to the side, and after the cylinder's installed and the handle's ready to go on, then these pieces could be installed here. That's not the way I did it. We're going to put some grease on here though. They come from the factory greased up like this, so why wouldn't I do it? And then what's next? We're going to, that chain guide plate, it's got a couple tears in it. So we're going to replace that. It's not part of the warranty, but we're going to make it like new for him. And a single screw holding this chain guide plate. I always just grab what's in front of me, trying to turn that thing in with a scrunch when I got the proper tools sitting in a box right next to the bench here. Okay, that's going to come back off later, but that's where it belongs. Okay, we got a bag of goodies from the original saw when we stripped it. Let's see what we got in here. Here's our oil pump. Just pushes into the oil line, clear the crankshaft, drop it into place. That's it. Now, I had forgotten, but I'm looking for the screws for the oil pump, and they're not in the bag. And that's because they're in the other short block. These holes for the oil pump are tapped into and through the crankcase. And when I pressure tested the saw, I had to put the screws back in so I could pressure and vacuum test it. I wanted the pump off of there so I could better see the crank seal, but I had to put the screws back in, you know, so I could didn't have a leak in the crankcase. So that's why the screws were still in the other short block. We put a little Loctite on them, seal them, screw them down tight. So there you go. We're getting there. Now, this is still the same saw. As far as Husqvarna and the warranty are concerned, this short block doesn't have a warranty date starting on the day that we put it in. It is part of the original purchase date, and it's still the same saw, same serial number, so we're going to move the tag over. So once I got the pins out for that tag, I can transfer it over, and I'm going to put a little Loctite in these holes just because those pins were disturbed. I'm not using new pins. I'm not aware of any of them falling off after I've installed them this way with the used pins. In fact, I'm not even sure if I can order a pin. Maybe. Alright. So now our new saw's got a serial number. These two yellow looking pieces, they're kind of nylon, plastic, ceramic type of insulators. And they support the front of the muffler. And I'm sure their purpose is to prevent a lot of heat transfer between the muffler and the crankcase. So we popped them out of the, and I say popped them out, they don't always come out so easy. But I popped them out of the other crankcase, and I'm kind of pounding them into place, but not completely. I don't want to bang on these things so hard that I break them, but I just want to get them set in place so that they don't fall back out. They'll get drawn down tight when I put the screws in through the muffler. Alright, we're going to mate the fuel tank. Now I guess we're going to put these clips in first. Snap lock clips just push in and snap in. 2 on this side. The third one is on the carburetor tray. So we'll just kind of get things close here, matched up. Get our wiring on top of the tray. I fumble a little bit with the fuel tank, and I keep forgetting, you got to rock this thing. You'll see my last movement here. Don't just try and push it in straight like I'm doing now. You got to turn it like that and then roll that locating pin into place. And then everything will fall where it belongs. We'll put our chain guide, or our chain catch, into place. That screw runs right into the anti-vibe spring. That looks good. Yep. And we'll kind of push that tray down. It kind of naturally lays where it belongs. Use a little bit of Loctite on these screws. Not 100% sure if Loctite's necessary on them. This one doesn't get Loctite. This is an anti-vibe screw. So that means there's 3 screws in the tray. That one's going a little bit hard, but it's in there. I don't know what my obsession is with grabbing the trigger and squeezing it all the time. I don't know if you regulars that watch this channel have noticed it or not, but I'm always doing that. Alright, number 3 for the carb tray screws. There you go. And our gasket kit. So if you order a short block, you have to order a gasket kit separately. This is what a Mark II cylinder base gasket looks like. And there's some locating pins between the crankcase and the cylinder. The gasket can only go on there one way. It's a metal with a rubber liner kind of gasket. And we don't need to put anything on it as far as sealant. Just taking a look at the old cylinder, because that did not get damaged. The original saw, making sure there's no dirt in there. Just double checking everything before I put it together. We got our squirt can of 2-cycle oil. Now we're going to inspect the old piston. Looks fine. Here's our bearing. Must have saw a little piece of schmutz on there or something that I blew it off. This is just Husky 50-to-1 oil. Or 2-cycle oil, I should say. Alright, then we're going to put a little bit of oil. Just looking at the piston. Now, when you put a piston on, there should be an arrow on the top of it. And that arrow is going to point to the exhaust port. So you want to orient it with that arrow facing forward. And then you can get the... Now, people are going to call it a wrist pin or a grunging pin. I don't care what you call it. We're going to push the pin in here and get it seated. Just wiping the schmutz off at the end of my scrunch. That scrunch gets used for a lot of things, don't it? It's good practice not to use these circlips over again. I know people do it all the time. This is a warranty repair. We're going to put a new pin in, or a new clip in here. Now you can kind of bend the old ones out of shape or whatever. It's also probably good practice to put a rag underneath the piston, so if that clip gets away from you, it might go flying. You might not see it go flying, and then you got to wonder, did it go in the crankcase or is it laying under the bench somewhere? And if you've never played that game, it's quite interesting. So I would advise just trying to avoid having to play that game at all. If the pin goes flying and you got a rag underneath the piston, you know it didn't go flying into the crankcase. So we lubricated the inside of the cylinder and we're lubricating the piston, just so that there's some oil there when we fire this thing up. That looks good. This block is just going to hold the piston from pushing down into the crankcase while I'm trying to install the cylinder. And this red band is a ring compressor. Make sure that the ring or rings are located with the end gaps in the locating pin on the piston. Then just squeeze the band together to compress the ring. And as you push the cylinder down, it'll push that tool out of place, and there you go. Then you remove the tool. Now we can lower the cylinder down over the top of those two locating pins that we talked about earlier. And take a look at it, make sure that it's sitting flush. You don't want to start running screws down in there and crack something. Alright, so these bolts that hold the cylinder down, they all have a spacer on them. So you got to drop the spacer and the bolt down in there, and I'm just kind of snugging them up right now by hand. You don't see me use a torque wrench a lot on my repairs, but I do like to torque a few things, and making sure that a cylinder is torqued down evenly, I feel, is important. So that's what we're going to do here. I believe the spec is 9 to 11 Newton meters on these bolts. So there you go, 9.04. Can't get much closer than that. Alright, look at them go. Now that we got the cylinder torqued down, we can put the muffler on. So the muffler has a deflector. It's that shiny piece with a curve on it between the muffler and the cylinder. It kind of directs air from the flywheel fan across the fins over there to get some of that cooling air back towards that back corner of the cylinder. Well, the holes in that thing are tight. Like right now, the impact is bottomed in that piece. It wasn't pulling the muffler up tight to the cylinder. The threads had stopped when that piece drew tight to the muffler. So that's why I backed the screw out all the way, pushed the muffler against the cylinder, and then started the screw again. And then you can see now it's drawn up tight. I don't know if that made sense, but don't be fooled into believing that that muffler's drawn up tight until you actually look at it and see that it is. And now we're running the screws down into that, those insulators, I guess we'll call them. And we're going to have to torque these down. You know, we'll have to pull them down a little bit because those insulators aren't quite set in there. First, we'll tighten the cylinder. And I usually tighten these good and tight. I don't use a torque wrench. I actually kind of think that I'm tightening them tighter than spec. But a loose muffler bolt, you know, that seems like a really lame reason to have to replace a cylinder if you damage it. So you can see we're still kind of pulling those insulators down. We got them good and tight. All right, that muffler shouldn't come loose. Here's another point where I might have gotten ahead of myself. I think I'm going to pull that spark plug back out of here. This is an insulation wall or insulator wall. It goes in between the cylinder and the, we'll call it the carburetor chamber. And it just keeps excess heat out of the carburetor area, so we're not pulling in a lot of hot air. A couple screws holding this down into place. You saw the first one there. I kind of had to twist on it a little bit. I don't think there was threads in the case for that one, but I tried it anyway. So now we're getting back to what I talked about earlier. This handle, it just won't go on there with that chain guide plate in place. So we're going to remove it. We're not going to use a scrunch. And you can see how if I went to put any of this stuff on here, meaning the spring and lever, even the oil pump, I suppose, I could do that now all at one time working on this side of the saw. But I just kind of push the lever against the spring enough to drop the handle in behind it. And the lever is kind of resting in a detent on the handle, and that's what gives it the feel that it has, where it kind of holds itself forward. So we crank this special shouldered screw down, hold the handle in place, and then you can see the chain guide plate kind of tucks behind the handle. And our single screw to hold it down in place. Another special shouldered screw to hold the handle down on this side. There we go. Yep, the handle feels good. The detent's doing what it's supposed to do. Now, I don't remember what was damaged on the old flywheel. I don't remember if there was a fin broken. I can't believe it was rubbing on the coil because we didn't replace the coil. But we're putting a new flywheel on it. We're going to torque it down to 22 Newton meters. And you can see I pulled the spark plug out and put a rope inside the cylinder as a piston stop. There we go. Torqued it down. And get our rope out of there. And we're going to set the coil air gap between the magnets of the flywheel and the lugs on the ignition coil. And I just put my 0.3 millimeter gap gauge in between, loosen up the screws, let the magnets pull the coil forward, and then tighten the screws down. Pretty simple. Important step, make sure you pull your thickness gauge back out of there. They sound really funny if you start them up and that metal gauge is tinkling around in there. Okay, now we got our handle. I like to try and locate the cylinder bolt first, because if there's any bend in the handle at all, and you mount the side and the bottom first, it can be difficult to get the spring to line up with the cylinder. So we're just gathering up all the right screws. And you'll see that there's some longs and some shorts. So first I'm tightening the anti-vibe spring on the cylinder. And then the side of the handle, that's going to get the long screws. And the bottom of the fuel tank is going to get the short screws. There we go. We got a handle. Here's our worm gear. Clutch drum drives the worm gear, which drives the oil pump. So the only time that the oil pump runs is when the chain's turning, when the clutch is engaged. We'll put our rim drive on our drum. And we'll spin our clutch on. And the clutch has got reverse threads on it. We'll use a special tool to adapt to the clutch. And I'm putting the spark plug back in now because engine compression is going to help keep the engine from turning over when I give it an ugga-dugga there with the impact. Now I'll put the starter on after I've hit that clutch with the impact. 4 screws, we got that down into place. Now we get to put the carburetor back on. This white connector is the auto-tune connector between the ignition coil and the carburetor. And that connector snaps into the side of the auto-tune module on the carburetor. Just like that. Now there is a fitting on the carburetor that goes into a hose, which is the impulse line. We got to make sure that's lined up when we push that carburetor tight against the boot. Putting our fuel line on right now. And connecting the throttle wire right now. The cable has a ferrule on the end of it, and that just fits into a slot on the carburetor. I'm going to kind of snap this carburetor into place. There is a couple tabs on the bottom that hold it. And there we go. Now we got the throttle cable in there where it belongs. Our airbox, there's a couple of things that have to happen here. There's just enough room to squeeze it in. We got to get the blue and black wire for the kill switch kind of located underneath some of the linkage on the side of the carburetor. We have to get this fuel return hose pushed on the back of the primer bulb. And then there's some tabs that the hose locates itself in on the back of the airbox. Can't see much, got his hands in the way. You know, this isn't a repair being done at home on my workbench or in a studio. You know, the boss lets me hang a camera over the bench at work, and whatever I can get, I can get. Not really thinking much about the camera right now. I'm trying to get this airbox put together. So there was a couple rubber tabs. We're still not located in those. Right now I'm locating one tab here. We'll get the other one. Those hold the back of the air or the bottom of the airbox. And then a couple screws that run through that airbox, through the carburetor, and hold it down. We'll turn these in by hand. Sometimes I'll use the power tool on it, but it's really not a good idea. We got those snug down pretty good. This is the short purge line from the primer to the carburetor. And it's not really a symmetrical line. It does have a weird, it's got an S shape to it, but both sides of the S aren't exactly the same. And sometimes you put it on there and it just doesn't feel right. So that was the impression I got this time around, so I just flipped it. I don't know if it makes a difference or not, but I don't know. I feel better about the way it's on there right now. Double checking our spark plug. This is the wire that we would use to connect the auto tune to the computer. We won't have to connect this to the computer after putting a short block in it. There's nothing's going to be different. We're using the same piston, the same cylinder, same coil, the same carburetor. So there's no reason to connect it. I'm going to put some fuel in here. I'm going to put some oil in here. And we're going to try and start it. And if it does start, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 550XP Mark II chainsaw that needed a new short block. Thanks for watching. Later. We want to hear it run.